discussion, and hi everyone for joining us at lunch hour today to look into social entrepreneurship and fundraising. So you guys are in for a treat. And before I start, I just want to make a quick mention. This panel discussion is brought to you by Spark Festival, which is Australia's biggest celebration of entrepreneurship Australia-wide. It is a place to get inspired, make connections with impact, and learn about the new economy. So I'm Phoebe Zhang. I'm the co-director of Founder Institute, and we are the world's largest pre-seed accelerator program. And what we do is we help early stage founders to get ready to get funding and also help them to get more tractions. And in particular, we are helping social entrepreneurs like you to take your business off the ground. So we are just waiting for our third panelist at the moment. And in the meanwhile, I will give you guys a brief introduction of the two panelists we have here right now with us. So firstly, we have Hannah Field, and Hannah is the principal of Tempest Partners. Hi, Hannah.
Hi, everyone.
Is the leading Australia venture capital firm, and it's really amazing how Tempest aims to back the next generation of Australia and New Zealand impossible technology companies. So Hannah, would you like to tell us a bit more about your work at Tempest?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks so much for having me, Phoebe, and great to connect with whoever's on this call dialing in. I am an investor at Tempest. We're a Sydney-based venture capital firm, as Phoebe said, investing in the next generation of impossible companies. So what that means in actuality is really investing in companies that are at the seed stage. We're typically sort of first check into these businesses, and they're typically building software and advanced technology businesses. So we're sector agnostic, but ultimately sort of looking at three things: really defendable competitive advantage, sustainable economics, and long growth horizons. So we're a VC that's not interested in quick exits. That's just not that exciting for us. We want to be sort of there at the start of the journey and there for the long term with multiple checks beyond just that first check at seed stage.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Hannah. And just before I give you guys introduction of Rob, I noticed our final panelist, Kieran, is logging in at the moment. And just to our production team, are you guys okay to bring Kieran into our panel now? Okay, I'll let you guys to work on that. You can just jump in and let me know a bit later. So sorry about the interruption. And next we have our amazing social entrepreneur, Rob Keslik. Hi, Rob. Hi. So for those of you who haven't heard of Rob, he is the founder of Too Good CO. And Too Good has this amazing story I'll let Rob to tell you guys shortly. It actually started with a very simple mission. I just want to feed some hungry people. So I think you guys started by giving lots of barbecues in King's Cross area, isn't it? Can you tell us a bit more about your story at Too Good?
Yeah, sure, Phoebe. Thank you. So that was the soup kitchen in King's Cross. The whole concept is around bringing people together around the table and sharing a meal. We realize that when you share food, you provide more than food itself, and dignity and respect and love. And so the idea for Too Good came out of a way to scale that. How do we kind of do that without continually asking for money? And so the buy one give one model really fit with us at the time. I was full-time engineering in construction, and kind of resigned from that to focus on Too Good, and it started to take off really. And so now we're donating 1,000 meals each week and employing women who are homeless as a pathway out of homelessness, and also looking to scale.
Yeah. Well, I think that's pretty amazing what you and Too Good do, Rob. So I guess let's just get into our topic today. And before we get into the specific questions about fundraising, when I started to research about I guess a while ago about social entrepreneurship, it really puzzles me what exactly is social entrepreneurship. And I sort of came across a range of different definitions. So I'm very curious if to both of you on the panel, each of you, like, what's your understanding of social entrepreneurship and how does it differ from just a general entrepreneurship?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, well, firstly, there's no pure definition of what a social enterprise is. So in Australia, you're either a for-profit company or not-for-profit company, but actually a social enterprise, there's no, real definition. There are great bodies out there who can verify that you are a social enterprise, like the social traders or even B Corp, and making sure that you are doing what you say you're doing. So that's one thing. I think for me, a social enterprise, I think I got into this leading with the heart and wanting to solve a problem or wanting to do something that resonates, and trying to support the community. But now looking at social entrepreneurship more broadly, it really just is a business with strong values and strong purpose. So, and the more that I think about it, the work that we do and the importance of scale is really treating it as a business first that just, oh, by the way, also does really great social impact. And so that's kind of one of the lessons I've learned along the way.
Yeah, that's so true. And what do you think, Hannah?
Yeah. I mean, I have to second what Rob is saying. I think there's no sort of single definition, and I'm sure it's evolved over the years. I think at one point the term, and this is coming from the investor lens, the idea of impact investing, and the idea of also generating returns, I think for a period of time was viewed as being sort of mutually exclusive concepts. And from an investor's perspective, that's simply not the case. And clearly that's changing, and looking at how can investment deliver a positive impact to society. And that can come in a range of different areas, whether it be education, whether it's feeding people, delivering critical resources that human beings need to exist and for society to continue evolving positively. So interestingly, Cambridge Associates released a report, a study about 5 years ago that was looking at sort of the returns of kind of impact investment arms. And what they found is that the returns of those impact funds were comparable on the level of sort of conventional venture capital firms, and in some instances even stronger. So, one caveat, just in terms of my perspective, is Tempus is not an impact investment fund. We don't identify ourselves as being that first and foremost, but a number of the businesses in our portfolio have massive social positive impact and what we call as second order benefits. And so we believe that when you're solving complex problems in very, very big markets that impact millions or billions of people, there is an inherent level of positive social delivery that you're kind of changing the way that those markets evolve or operate, and delivering positive outcomes for end users. So,
yeah, that is so interesting. And I have to say that when I eventually come to the conclusion of what social entrepreneurship is, it also amazes me to see is quite widely recognized that when we look at the social and economic benefits and the values created by businesses, we either look at one end of the spectrum, which is non-for-profit, and that's where the social value creation lies. And then there's the other extreme, which is the for-profit, which is, not necessarily consider the social impact side of things. And social entrepreneurship, social enterprise seems to lie just on this wide spectrum in between. So we can either have non-for-profit but for-profit. And I guess it's always a myth when we talk about social entrepreneurship. Many people tend to just default into it is non-for-profit or is likely to be non-for-profit, right? And I wonder, do you guys see that as a awareness it needs to be raised when it comes to getting funding for social enterprise? So I know there are certainly different type of investors who look into social impact. But in terms of the general investor community, do you think there is a myth happening in there that when they hear about social enterprise, they just think about non-for-profit, and that became a bit of a hurdle for entrepreneurs to raise funding?
I think there's definitely probably some misnomer or an assumption that social enterprise is nonprofit, and clearly they're not the same things. I mean, I'd love to hear Rob's perspective because you sort of sit on the founder side, so you deal with all of the assumptions and the bad assumptions that sometimes investors and maybe not institutional investors, but maybe less sophisticated investors, people who are just looking to allocate capital, they're sort of new to investment and don't really understand the nuances between social enterprise and this is actually different from an NGO or a pure kind of non-traditional nonprofit. But I think the short answer from my view is, yeah, absolutely. I think there is a bit of education required.
We're probably a great example. We have two. We have both a not-for-profit foundation and also a for-profit social enterprise. So we actually have a dual entity, and we have Minter Ellison, for instance, who has kind of got the governance between the two to make sure the governance is really strong. But there's definitely, certainly a misnomer, and people often think, you must be a charity. All that work you're doing, you must actually be a not-for-profit. And I think, and it's also a mindset internally for ourselves as well. We, not-for-profit doesn't mean not for revenue. We actually, for us to grow, we need to grow and be profitable so we can do more good. It's certainly the objective for us to scale and to grow the revenue and to grow the margins that we are actually being able to make in order to invest into more programs. But we actually have the two entities, a for-profit social enterprise, which is the social credits accredited, and then we have an ACNC registered charity that helps to deal with some of the inefficiencies of the employment. All the training and employment of unskilled people is a really costly thing to do. So the foundation we've set up to help us to deal with all of that employment side of things for the people that we employ. So we kind of have the two, and which also enables us to get two sorts of funders as well. So someone who needs the DGR status and investing in a pure ACNC recognised charity, and then someone who's actually also okay to invest in the social enterprise or the for-profit company. So we've been able to get funding from both sides.
Yeah, that's so interesting to know. And to the guys online, we just have our third panelist joining us. Hi, Kieran. Hi.
Hello. Hey, Phoebe. Hey, guys.
Yeah, sorry we couldn't see you or hear you earlier. So, guys, Kieran is the partner of a Sydney-based law firm, Addison's. And Addison's has this amazing long-standing history. I think it's about 140 years, which was a really big wow, because I know Australia, it doesn't have a very, very long history to itself. But Addison's has over 140 years of serving commercial law on a range of different variety of legal counsel service. Yeah, locally. And Kieran, before he joined Addison's, he had a very, very rich and extensive experience in dealing with commercial transactions worldwide. I remember it was in Europe, wasn't it, Kieran?
It was. Yes.
Yeah. And later on, after that, Kieran found his true passion in helping startup companies in building up their dreams successfully. Would you like to tell a bit about what make you change? Like I think it's just made the change to a startup world. Is it okay?
Yeah, sure. And look, I'm sorry for coming in late and interrupting the flow here. We'll get back to talking about this very interesting topic in one second. Look, my background was in private equity, and I enjoyed the sort of transactions in private equity. But what I really got a kick out of, and still get a kick out of, is working with founders in startups and early stage companies, particularly in the tech space. And we are huge advocates and cheerleaders for founders. They're smart, decisive, just don't have time for nonsense, and we love that. So we also advise investors in the space primarily on fundraising and M&A, but our real focus and passion is acting for founders.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kieran. So you didn't miss out much. We are just starting, and we were discussing the question early on about, how social entrepreneurship is a very broad kind of a definition. Different people have different ideas of it. So I'm just curious, what is social entrepreneurship to you? Like, how does it?
Look, I think it's simple. I think in simple terms, it's purpose and profit. I think it's hard to get specific about this because it is quite subjective and it means different things to different people. But I think it is worthwhile making the distinction between social entrepreneurship and not-for-profit, which you've already done. I think that one of the things that we need to recognise is, in my view anyway, that social entrepreneurship does not mean that we're not running, good, profitable, sound, long-term businesses.
Yeah, that is so true, Kieran. And based on your experience, like when you, I guess, see your startup client do fundraising, because I know that's one of your specialties, working with startups at the moment. Do you think it come across to you is more difficult for social entrepreneurs to raise funding than just an average founder?
No, not necessarily. In fact, I think it's hard to. There's a lot of different factors that go into a successful fundraising, whether startups are funded, and oftentimes it's difficult to identify, the one or the two criteria that made it easier or harder. But I think it's a very different environment now to what it was sort of even 5 years ago. I think the mood has really changed, and I think now that investors are starting to appreciate that founders can have an underlying passion for social change that they are fostering in a business. And I think not only an appreciation for that, but a recognition that they are, for a lot of investors, very sound investments. So, as I said, it really is sort of, it's different for each startup, and sometimes it depends on how they're pitching their business. But if it is genuinely purpose and profit, then in this day and age, particularly more so than, as I said 5 years ago, it should be seen as an advantage rather than an obstacle.
Yeah, absolutely. And anyone has anything to add to Kieran?
I think so. I've not tried to raise funds before as a separate for-profit company. One thing I find easier on than what I hear from others is it's easier for me to get someone to the table because of the social good that we're doing. So I think, but the actual transaction, getting the investment would be as difficult as any organisation, but getting them to the table or getting those introductions and meeting people and getting time in front of someone, I find a little bit easier because the ability to invest in something that has great social change, it's sort of I guess you're talking to a different part of that person as opposed to going for a pure financial investment. I know that it's going to have to meet both in order to get it across the line, but to get the person to the table, I find a little bit easier than what I hear some of my other founders who don't have social, included.
Yeah. I would say, just kind of echoing what Kieran has said, for us, some of the investments we've been most excited about has had this really powerful purpose-driven kind of mission. And, I can sort of rattle off a few businesses in our portfolio. We've got Aurelius Healthcare, which is providing a digital platform to enable people who are recovering from addiction kind of leave rehab and deal with the broad world where there's very little support or connected support as they deal with a lifelong chronic illness, basically. We've got a business called Swoop Arrow that's providing logistics within healthcare. So in developing nations around the world, access to basic healthcare is a dream, and they can't get access to pharmaceuticals, vaccines, and they're deployed initially in Vanuatu and places across Africa. But that's the kind of infrastructure that we could absolutely see in developed economies like Australia. So again, it's very purpose-driven, but the problem they're solving is significant. The market is global. It's a massive problem, and it drives out outcomes, positive outcomes for all people. And so, those are sort of a couple of examples of businesses. Health Matches, company that's enabling artificial intelligence to expedite the clinical trial matching process. So, yes, the kind of immediate utility is for pharmaceutical companies in the R&D process, but ultimately, what are the most powerful levers that we can be pulling to enable that we're pushing drugs to market faster, saving lives, expediting research? And so all of those things have really powerful kind of purposes that fuel their mission. So
that is so true. So I wonder, where can a social entrepreneur find investors willing to invest into his or her space? Like, where would you, for example, Robert, like, where would you find investors that are willing to invest into Toolwood?
Oh, so we, for instance, companies. So we can look at different companies who have certain kind of pillars that they like to support. If it's the philanthropy side, and in fact, some companies are also able to invest in a for-profit social enterprise, providing you can demonstrate your social impact. And so there's two ways. Going straight into corporations, some of the large banks, so who clearly outline what their areas are which they'd like to support. So that's one angle, and the other angle is for high net worth individuals and looking at what areas they might like to support and really trying to align your social impact with the values that they are actually looking to invest in. So we have a couple of high net worth people who are investing in us. And when I say investing, it's more like we don't offer them a return. It's literally, here's some money. We believe in what you're doing. We want to see you grow this. And so that's the kind of types of investment that we are looking for, both in the social enterprise, but also the charity. And they're the two lines in which we go down. We don't often apply for grants as much anymore, but rather look at kind of a larger organisation and where they want to invest their social, the CSR budgets, and aligning ourselves with those organisations.
Yeah.
And just adding to that, there's also ventures that are specifically focused on impact investing. So just want to highlight a few of my peers in the industry. Rachel Yang at Giant Leap, they're an extraordinary venture capital firm. And if you're looking at sort of specifically impact investing, they're the people to talk to. Albert's Impact Capital, which is kind of family office, but in essence running as a venture capital firm and doing some incredible investments there that are aligned with that family's history and values. And, there are a number of social ventures in Australia. So there are a number of other kind of institutions that operate as sort of true investment vehicles, are looking for returns, but have criteria that's modeled specifically around that social impact piece.
Yeah, that's very good to know. So for a social entrepreneur who is looking for funding, I guess it's very much similar to when the founders are designing a solution or a product to fit into its market space. We got to think about what does the specific investor, what's their investment mandate requires, and in what space they invest in as well. So I guess the next question is, do you guys have any tips for our social entrepreneurs online when they are out there and looking for funding? How can they find that suitable investor for them? What do they need to really look out for?
I think my one piece of advice is... sorry, go ahead.
No, please. No, you go.
I don't know how extraordinary this answer is, but in my opinion, the number one thing to do is to do your research and really understand who you're talking to before you reach out. I think, for founders who are doing this for the first time, the capital raise process is not easy. It's arduous. It can take a lot of time. But you might as well be allocating your time towards the right sort of profile of investor. So, understand who are their origins. Like these websites are usually very detailed in terms of what they're looking at, profile of business, look at their existing portfolio. What kinds of businesses have they invested in before? Does that sort of seem compatible with the business you're building now? So I think kind of my number one advice, and sometimes where I see things that kind of don't hit the mark, at least at top of funnel for us, is people haven't really spent the time to understand Tempest and what we're backing. And likewise, I know this is a similar challenge for other VCs.
Yeah. And you were saying
I'll
something
just add
before.
Yeah, no, it's, and I guess it's no different to any one going for funding. It's just that ability to tell a story. Like I think where we've had some success is being able to articulate the problem that you're solving, and in real time, like really, not just me going out there saying how good we are, but hearing it from the people in which we're walking beside and getting them to talk about that we're having on them, and with money we can scale this. And so to be really, really, really solid on your story and the problem that you're solving, and using those emotions to try to get it across the line.
That's so true. Is there anything you'd like to add, Kieran? Or they pretty much covered everything?
Just picking up on Hannah's point, I think founders often forget to do their diligence on potential investors. And the aim really is to find investors who are a great fit for your business, and investors that understand what you're trying to solve, and your story resonates with. So I think that investors are not they're not put off when founders start asking questions of the investors and what they stand for and the businesses they like to invest in. I think in terms of trying to find the right fit, it probably starts with the type of funding that is the right fit, and that may be that you speak to Tempest partners and other VCs. It may be that you're at a stage where it might be too early, so you just need some supportive angel investment to get you to a point where you're more investable. It might be that crowdsource equity funding or Kickstarter or something else is the right fit. But once you've understood the structure of the funding, then I think it's just trying to find investors who you tell your story and it resonates with.
Yeah, yeah, that's so.
Just underlining something you said, Kieran, that I love and I often sort of mention in these sorts of events is asking questions of investors. I think. Sometimes founders are a bit reticent to really ask the tough questions, and how can you possibly know what this relationship is going to look like 10 years down the road if you ask nothing of the investor? And so just remember that it is a two-way street. It's not just us choosing you have to choose us as well. We're a big believer that speed dating doesn't lead to great outcomes, and we want to build relationships with founders in a kind of rational and long-term way. And obviously speed is not always something that we have, or rather we don't want to always be sort of driving towards very fast term sheets and that kind of thing. And we don't always have a lot of time, but ideally, we want to be hearing from founders very early in the journey, even if they're not at that capital raise place, and they might be very kind of pre-seed, just a concept, a very early MVP. And we sort of welcome those conversations so that we can work with you over the longer term to really understand who are you, but give you an opportunity to understand who we are. And I think, my peers in the industry would say the same, that would just really encourage you to ask those tough questions and really understand, what is it like to work with you? What is it like to be a portfolio company? What if we're missing the milestones? What does that mean for the next check? And, when conversations get tough, like what does that typically look like? So, just would encourage everyone who are founders who are listening to ask those deep questions.
And that's such a an important point. Hannah, I think it often get missed by founders because the founders get so focused on trying to get their ideas across. So usually quite focused on putting their energy from them to the investors, but really to become aware that it's a two-way street and the communications needs to happen on both sides. So it's not just that they give you guys the information, explanation, it's also they seek clarification from you guys as well. So it's very much two ways.
Yeah.
And early on, Kieran mentioned about the due diligence when founders choose investors. And I think, Kieran, that's also part of your service, right? Would you tell us a bit more about that, like what you guys do in terms of helping founders?
Yeah, sure. So just to clarify, we do legal due diligence. We do not pretend to have any expertise in choosing investors who are the right fit for their company. But I think so. If founders, whether they're social entrepreneurs or otherwise, I think there's a process to fundraising that I think starts with the recognition that it's not a quick process. It's going to take longer than you think, and it's going to be at times frustrating. So plan for that. So the first, I think the first step, even before, in fact, well before we would get involved, and this is just picking up a point Hannah mentioned, is develop a relationship with potential investors. Don't hit them up when you need money next Friday. It's not going to work. In fact, the investors that you get in your Series A are probably the investors who will say no at your late seed stage, but they just wanted to be introduced and then come along the journey. So you might think, I've spoken to an investor and they've said no. That doesn't necessarily mean that it hasn't been a worthwhile exercise. So if you're planning a fundraise, go and speak to investors for the purpose of establishing a relationship, not to hit them up for capital. That moment will come. So we the legal aspect of it is important, but it's by no means the most important. But just if I look through a legal lens, and this is for social entrepreneurs, as it is for any entrepreneur. There's really two work streams that we'd encourage founders to focus on. One is getting investor ready, making sure their house is in order. That could be, making sure they've got the right corporate structure, making sure they've protected their IP, they've got their business basics, they've got a data room ready. So there's an element of, we are taking this seriously, we're investor ready, this is a professional outfit ready for a transaction. So that's probably the first work stream. The second is the transaction itself, the fundraising. So that starts with, as I said, establishing a relationship. Towards the more exciting end, it is a pitch deck, term sheet, shareholders agreement. If the founders haven't established a really concrete relationship amongst themselves before that point, then something's gone horribly wrong. They really need to make sure that they have a very concrete relationship as founders, so that they can have a unified front when they talk to investors, and they understand their expectations of each other. So that for us is a pretty important part of that process. The thing I'd add for social entrepreneurs from a legal point of view is consider your corporate structure or your legal structure through the lens of your purpose. And what I mean is, answer the question, do I want to be a B Corp? If I do want to be a B Corp, then there's a process and some legal requirements around that. So, and that's a rigorous exercise. So I wouldn't underestimate that task. Part of the B Corp process is to acknowledge or entrench in your constitution, which is your basic governing legal document for the company, is that you have principles and purpose and considerations beyond purely maximizing profit for the company. So, and that you can do that whether or not you choose to become a B Corp. But that is an important legal step, I think, that's probably an additional consideration for social entrepreneurs.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point. And also, something quite fascinating. I think Kieran brought a bit early on into the conversation, and I think the rest of our guys also touched on that, is to really start building this relationship with investors before you start looking for money. So I guess for the benefits of the founders sitting on the line at the moment listening in, what are some of the tips, I guess, you guys would like to share with founders in terms of building this relationship with the investors? Or maybe it's in the past you have dealt with some founders or friends you've seen that had this great skill of building relationship with the investors. If you can just share with us.
Yeah. So we've had a number of investments where when the founders were just kind of very early thinking about fundraising and they were still in an accelerator program, we established that touch point, sort of reach out to them, have that initial conversation, and then sparked a series of conversations. Now, not with like a high degree of cadence, but over the course of sort of 6 to 8 months. And again, appreciating that not everyone has 6 to 8 months under their belt if you're looking to kind of fundraise now, but if you have that luxury and you're thinking of planning ahead. And what's worked really well about those conversations was, really building the relationship, understanding what makes them tick, why are they building this business, like truly what are the ambitions beyond just the pitch deck, which is just a lens. It's just an articulation of facets of the business that everyone wants to look at. Your market size, what's your competitive advantage? You've got your kind of classic infrastructure on the pitch deck, but it doesn't tell me anything about who you are as a person and why you're building what you're building, and ambitions for the long term. So I sort of mentioned before, as a firm, we're not looking for really fast exits. Like, we want to be on the journey to build a really valuable business over the next 10 and 20 years. And so a lot of that is teased out through really kind of deep conversations with founders, and the way that you can maintain a degree of connection in between those conversations is really simple through things like email updates, and founders will sort of circulate to an inner circle updates on the business, sort of new revenue they've added on this month or this quarter, and new customer wins and churn, but sort of maybe some color and context around the churn, and we've sort of learned a lot more about the ideal customer profile for a business, and so we're sort of moving the business in another direction. And then I think the other thing for founders who are really serious about thinking about raising capital in the future and are having discussions with us, we're really transparent about what are the challenges we see in the business, or where do we think growth might be hindered, or how are you actually thinking about distributing this one product, and what are the unique challenges around them, or what is the unique insight that founder might have about that distribution strategy. We love to see founders internalize that conversation and respond to it later and say, hey, you had a question about X and there was a lot of kind of unknowns here. Here's what we've learned about that. Or the assumption that you guys, or hypothesis you had about this market, actually, this is all the things we've learned, and it looks like that assumption might not be correct. And there is a big untapped opportunity here. So just a demonstrated willingness to ingest the conversation, like really genuinely so, and sort of work together, because that is reflective of what it's going to be like on the other side, right? Whether it's at a board level from like a governance perspective, or maybe we're just board advisors, or we're just on the cap table, but we're here with an open door and you need help with something. And so it can just be a reflection of what that relationship will look like later on. And it gives founders a chance to stress test us, and likewise kind of for us to understand, how do founders think, how do they remain agile, how do they look at challenges but don't look at them as roadblocks, but as opportunities to learn and grow, and navigate their business through challenges. So
yeah, so well said, and thank you so much, Hannah. Rob, is there anything you'd like to add from your own experience when working with investors on building relationships?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the best bits of advice I had was never ask for money, only ever ask for advice. If someone's going to invest in you, you have to have that relationship, anyway. And so really going to someone and asking their advice and taking that on and then building a relationship from that point of view of once someone is invested in you and with their knowledge, you can really already start to have that initial relationship. And then as the relationship grows, to really understand that there are two entities. So with some of our larger corporate partners, one being Charter Hall, a big property company, they have some really good outcomes that they like to think of around employment, for instance. So whenever we are discussing our impact with Charter Hall, we talk about it in terms of employment. This is what you actually helped us achieve in terms of employment, and really trying to understand that there's two, that they are a big part of what we're doing. And so anytime we're speaking to them, we're talking into the language that they actually want to report on themselves. And really looking at us. One of the things, so Charter Hall is another great example. So about 2 years ago, they gave us a large philanthropic donation, which was amazing. But when we really worked that relationship hard to make sure we demonstrated the impact that they've had, we built a relationship on that, so much so that the next year the investment increased a lot more, but it was more of a business to business relationship where we went into them, into their marketing. So they did campaigns within their shopping centres, and they invested in us for us to tell us stories within those shopping centres. But it was more of a business to business relationship other than a business to charity. Here's the money, you're doing a great job. This was when we actually had to deliver a service for that business. It really helped us grow up as a business first, and the relationship changed to business. And that's where I'd much rather play than and be respected as a business first. That, oh, by the way, does is the great social impact work. And so that's some of the stuff that we like to really get into. You're already buying some of these products. Why not purchase through us, and we will deliver a social impact that you can then talk about.
Yeah. That is so true. And to the audience online watching us, if you have any questions, there is a function on your screen to send your question to us. And when I see them come through, I will pass it to our panelists to answer. So just make sure you put your questions in so we can see it. Okay, so the next question, I guess, I will ask Hannah first, but I think Kieran and Rob will probably add some of their thoughts later. We touched on the concept of impact investing. So I wonder, from an investor's perspective, for you, Hannah, what is impact investing? And how is it different from just an average regular investing?
I think we touched on this sort of at the very start of the conversation, but I think it's about, for us, it's about allocating capital that we know moves the needle from a social impact point of view. So if you think about sort of ESG factors, which cover a range of different areas, whether you're looking at gender equality or improving education or healthcare infrastructure, all of these different dimensions. How is the allocation of the capital that you're putting into a business really going to move the needle? And is that business, do they embody the values around a particular factor that positively impacts society? So, I think in a very broad strokes term, unfortunately, I don't have like an exact definition, but I think we sort of elaborated on that sort of at the start of the conversation. And we talk a lot about second order benefits. And so sort of while again, we don't qualify ourselves as being in impact investment VC, we do think a lot about the value of a business beyond just its immediate utility. So the technology is powerful. It's doing incredible things with AI or machine learning or building data networks, but really, what is the value that's being created beyond just the utility of the technology itself? How is it, say, reducing crime, which is a business in our portfolio? How is it improving healthcare outcomes? How is it how is it removing friction around distribution of distribution of education, so that it levels the playing field within, say, K through 12 education, which everyone should have access to. So, I think for us, it's looking at a business beyond just the exact utility, and how is it having a ricochet effect that positively impacts society as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is it weighted? So when you're going to invest in an organization, is the social impact it's a second order benefit, but is it actually weighted as far as if you're going to make that investment or not, will that actually get it across the line? Or is it purely in Tempus's, for instance, because, as you mentioned, the impact is not your core, but is it weighted in the decision?
The question itself is not a sort of discrete question, but we look at things like size of market, and we're big believers that, if you're actually building something within complex environments that impact huge markets, and healthcare happens to be kind of a trend of ours in our portfolio, even though it's not specific. When you're solving huge inefficiencies within healthcare, you are inevitably touching the lives of patients, whether that's access to drugs, whether that's an improved support experience if you're a recovering addict, whether it's access to new clinical trials that you were not aware. We're sort of empowering, or a business is empowering the patient, right? We're no longer empowering doctors. We're shifting that experience so that we can put healthcare in the journey, or that the healthcare access back into the hands of patients. So I think it's a flow-on effect. But as a matter of fact, we actually engage with a third-party service provider that does analysis in our portfolio against ESG factors and sustainability areas. So it is something that we do monitor internally. I don't know whether other VCs do that, but that is something that we have been doing for a little while now, because we believe it's important, and we want to understand how does our portfolio, how is it behaving with regards to ESG? And these are sort of well-documented factors that we know, positively improve society. And let's actually break it down and take a more analytical approach to our investments, and understand how are we sort of performing over time.
So guys, we are towards the end of our panel today. And to our audience, if you have any questions for our panelists online, please make sure you just send it to us through the chat feature on your screen. So I'm just let me just wait for a few seconds for the questions to come through. And while we wait, if it's okay, we'll just give you guys another quick introduction of the Founder Institute program. So to the audience online, we have a very structured 14-week program to help early stage entrepreneurs to build their business up from the ground. And we specialize in helping you to build traction and to get funding ready. The application to our next intake is opening now, and it will start in mid-February, and it is a 14 weeks program. So if you go on Google and Google Founder Institute, or our web address is fi.co, you can go there and look for more information. So let me just quickly check if there's any question coming in. Okay, we have one here. So Raj have a question, and I think it seems like we have covered most of it already in the earlier panel discussion. So Raj's question is, taking the potential investors along the journey, where to go to attract investors who are interested? So I think this is a topic we have touched base early on in the panel discussion. But is there anything else that anyone would like to add from our panel? Where to go to find investors that are interested to invest in a particular startup?
I think Twitter's a pretty good. I think
yes,
there's that. Yeah. And I would say Twitter's a great playground for investors and startups alike. Just networking amongst each other, but also with investors. I mean, I would say the power of social media is incredible, because we can sort of in bite-sized pieces monitor what you're doing, and what you're saying and how you're thinking about a business that you're building. And so it's we certainly take in from all channels, whether it's Twitter or LinkedIn, but I would say Twitter's a really great place. So feel free to follow me on Twitter and DM me.
Yeah.
Or email me.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Hannah. And anything from you, Kieran and Rob? Anything to add?
For me, no.
look,
So I mean, you go. Sorry, Kieran, you go, man.
I was just going to say, look, that I'm sure Hannah won't disagree with this, but a warm introduction to a VC, if you go down the VC route, is going to put you in better stead than a cold call. And sometimes you have no choice if you can't find that warm introduction. But I think that's a really great suggestion from Hannah. Is try to develop that warm introduction through Twitter or LinkedIn if you can't get there through your network.
And Rob, you were saying something before?
No, just to add, I mean, understand where you be true to your values and work out what who do you want to work with in the first instance, and then start looking up. I mean, looking up where the VCs are at, or the companies are at, or who's investing in what. So understanding first the value that you can create for the problem you're trying to solve for that investor.
Yeah, that's very true too. And it seems like we are running out of time, but we have one more question. I'm not sure if we have time for this production team. Just let me know if I don't. But I will just pose this question to our panelists. So Ben online mentioned this question. Do you think COVID-19, both the crisis itself and the recovery period we're talking about, will make social enterprise more or less attractive to investors?
I think more attractive.
Yeah.
I mean, I think COVID highlighted a lot of infrastructural issues around things like education, healthcare, particularly in the US. I think, I know we're very lucky in Australia. And so we sort of, in our heads, we think, oh, everyone's kind of gone back to school, obviously Melbourne aside. But there are some really, really astronomically large problems that are happening in other countries right now. People don't have access to basic internet at home. That's the case in Australia as well. So if everyone's working from home, how do you continue educating your child? For countries where federal programs around getting, a hot meal every day for underprivileged kids, how are they getting that? Is there infrastructure that sort of supports that? And then just basic access to healthcare is just a totally different issue in places like the US. But I think in times of crisis and in global crisis, all it does is it just rips open the reality of all the problems that exist, societally speaking, and just different areas of infrastructure. And I think there's a huge opportunity to founders to build something really valuable. And I'm not talking from a charity perspective. I'm saying a really valuable business that has the capacity to have a huge impact.
Yeah, that's very true. And sorry, guys, we ran out of time to give Kieran and Rob a chance to answer this question too. But I think in general, definitely yes, because overall it raised awareness of a variety of social and infrastructure issues as well, right? So how about we give a round of applause? I know it's only me can be heard at the moment, but thank you so much, Hannah. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Kieran, for making the time.
Thanks so much for having us, Phoebe.
Yeah, for lunch hour today to join this panel discussion, and I hope you have a great afternoon. And to our audience as well, thank you, and I hope it's been informative to you as well. Okay, thank you, guys.